The missing 5 ounces of the female brain. Ha 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 ha. Oh, and she's live. Hey everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I guess I have a YouTube channel now, so welcome back to it. Today I wanted to discuss some of the most influential books, to me personally, that I read in 2017. So, let's get stuck in. The first book I wanted to discuss with you today is called Inferior by Angela Saini. And I picked this book up in Foyles on the South Bank in London. And it was right after I graduated university. I was kind of in a funk after that. After finishing and submitting my dissertation, I didn't want to read anything overly academic, and yet I was drawn to this book. It is indeed quite academic, but in a hand-holdy sort of way. She really leads you down the path of, well, human evolution, and in doing so discusses how women are not necessarily the inferior sex, but at least how sexism in the scientific industries has painted women as such. And she uses examples from letters and books Darwin wrote to the current conception of the stay-at-home mom to discuss this. I'll just read a little excerpt from the inside flap for you. Scientists claim to have written the definitive account of us, starting from the very dawn of evolution, but this is not the whole story. Even in the modern world, it's impossible to escape our biology. Men are depicted as the stronger, smarter sex, while women are portrayed as more empathetic and as natural caregivers. We buy dolls for our girls and toy trucks for our boys, marking the first in a chain of ways that we raise our children differently. But how balanced is the research that has led us to this understanding of men and women? So it's a very thorough account of not only sexism in the scientific industry, but also about current constructions of gender roles in our quotidian society and interactions, as well as potential evolutionary explanations for some things like menopause, etc. Read this book and you will be rife with facts for counter-arguments against the pseudoscience that so many sexist people profess, because Angela really does her work. This is one of the most thoroughly backed up sources I've ever read. You know, I think even that is a credit to how little people are willing to believe women, because we have to source and cite everything so thoroughly to just be, you know, treated with the respect we deserve as an expert in the field, or just an expert in everyday issues of womanhood. So, you know, the whole mansplaining thing that caught off on Twitter, that's just an everyday fact of women's lives. I think it was definitely necessary for her to have done such in-depth research and source this, and not just whip this out of her you-know-what like some men do when they write books, but it really pays off because this is just a wealth of information. And I'm so happy to have read this. The content is just incredible. Definitely probably my favorite book of 2017. So to transition from the more academic side of womanhood, let's look at the career aspects. I actually picked this book up at the same time I bought Inferior in Foyles on the South Bank, and how could I resist this beautiful little cover? I wasn't working at the time. As I said, I had just graduated university, but everything in here is applicable no matter whether you're in a corporate job, or freelancing, or looking to freelance, or looking to get into a corporate job, or still in university, or even still in high school, because it teaches some really basic foundations. For example, how and why to learn new skills, keeping your mind and body on track. So it's just a lot of stuff that, you know, it seems basic, but things that people often overlook. But it does move beyond the basic to discuss things like negotiating your salary or negotiating a pay raise. Things that a lot of working women I have come to understand and have also experienced personally will feel like they can't ask for, or feel like they don't have the tools or even the right to ask for. It's good even if you're not a woman, but it's geared towards women, and that's something I really appreciate. So thank you, Otega Uwagba. She also has an amazing podcast. I will link it in the description box and also write it on screen because that's also been keeping me going. Shout out to Otega Uwagba. She's doing great things, and she just got listed as one of the Forbes 30 under 30, so I trust her advice. Another really touching book I read, and this is more in the literary fiction genre, is Brooklyn. And I know that this was recently made into a film, and this is actually the film cover of the novel because that's just the one I picked up in Waterstones. But I picked this up when I was in Cardiff, and wow, just how gorgeous is Saoirse Ronan, by the way. Just looking at this, it's got little screen caps from the film, and wow, she looks amazing. But yeah, it's just such a touching book. It touches on a lot of things like moving from your home and making a new home somewhere else, which I really related to after having moved to the UK and lived there, as well as negotiating the tension that arises with that between your, I guess, two worlds and living as two people, the person you were back home in one place and the person you fashioned in another place. And I really think of it personally as this concept in linguistics called code switching, which is where your accent or dialect, just the way you speak, can change depending upon a situation. And that might be an entire language, a dialect. It's about a young girl who moves from Ireland to New York City, Brooklyn specifically, in the 1950s. And it touches on romance and kind of coming of age and familial ties and having a foot in two countries and navigating the struggles of relationships or the strain that's put on relationships because of that, especially in the 1950s. They didn't have Skype, they didn't have international flights, or I guess they did, but they didn't have, you know, hop on a plane, 6 hours, you're in Dublin. And a lot of people have lauded this book, and obviously he's a wonderful writer, and it was recently made into a film. But Eilish is just a very relatable character for me personally. I cried, and it's kind of hard to make me cry, so if you want to go base your recommendation off that alone. I did cry! I cried! It was good. I still haven't seen the film. Should I see the film? I'm really more of a book version over film version kind of person, but yeah, maybe I've also just been avoiding crying again. Maybe I'll watch it. Next review. Another book I'd like to recommend, or that I want to laud as having shaped my 2017, was actually The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. And obviously it's a classic. I'm assuming most people, if you're American at least, have read it during high school, or were meant to read it and kind of read the Spark Notes, whatever, are familiar with it. I reread this because after I graduated university I was feeling a little bit lost, and I remembered reading this my sophomore year of high school, so when I was about 15, and thinking, wow, I can't imagine being that old, because Esther, the main character of the book, is kind of in the transitional period where she's just finishing university. Sorry if the shot looks different, my camera died. Professional. I would put a word of warning with The Bell Jar though, because it discusses suicide a lot, and it's not the most uplifting of books, but it can be a really good journey into the introspection. A lot of people, especially young women, face, because it deals with, again, sexism and just navigating life as a young woman. But I wanted to read an excerpt from it, and I know this has been like quoted and romanticized a lot, but you know what? I don't care, because it does speak to me a lot personally. And when I read this around September of 2017, it really reminded me why I love this book and why I was relating to it at that point in my life. So here's an excerpt. It's on page 76 of my version. A little doggy right here for you guys. I didn't know shorthand either. This meant I couldn't get a good job after college. My mother kept telling me nobody wanted a plain English major. but an English major who knew shorthand was something else again. Everybody would want her. She would be in demand among all the up-and-coming young men, and she would transcribe letter after thrilling letter. The trouble was, I hated the idea of serving men in any way. I wanted to dictate my own thrilling letters. Besides, those little shorthand symbols in the book my mother showed me seemed just as bad as t equals time and let s equal the total distance. My list grew longer. I was a terrible dancer. I couldn't carry a tune. I had no sense of balance, and when we had to walk down a narrow board with our hands out and a book on our heads in gym class, I always fell over. I couldn't ride a horse or ski, the two things I wanted to do most, because they cost too much money. I couldn't speak German or read Hebrew or write Chinese. I didn't even know where most of the old, out-of-the-way countries the UN men in front of me represented fitted on the map. For the first time in my life, sitting there in the soundproof heart of the UN building between Konstantin, who could play tennis as well as simultaneously interpret, and the Russian girl who knew so many idioms, I felt dreadfully inadequate. The trouble was, I had been inadequate all along. I simply hadn't thought about it. The one thing I was good at was winning scholarships and prizes, and that era was coming to an end. I felt like a racehorse in a world without racetracks, or a champion college footballer suddenly confronted by Wall Street in a business suit. His days of glory shrunk to a little gold cup on his mantle, with a date engraved on it like the date on a tombstone. I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children, and another fig was a famous poet, and another fig was a brilliant professor, and another fig was E.G., the amazing editor, and another fig was Europe and Africa and South America, and another fig was Constantine and Socrates and Attila and a pack of other lovers with queer names and offbeat professions, and another fig was an Olympic lady crew champion, and beyond and above these figs were many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest, and as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one, they plopped to the ground at my feet. What a happy note to end this video on. I think it's a very relatable feeling even now because, what with people creating their own careers and being self-employed more and more often due to social media and the internet, it just seems like the possibility to do more and more things grows and grows and stretches, especially for women. So I feel you, Sylvia. That's all I'm trying to say. This is overall a very bittersweet read. So I think that concludes my book recommendations that I read in 2017 or reread. Well, that really hit home. They all were women-centric and discussed problems I'm facing more and more myself as I become a young woman. So I thought maybe a lot of you could relate to that as well. And I don't think I've seen these grouped together, so I just wanted to put that out there into the world. I know that they kind of are in completely different genres, especially these two, because this is more academic and this is more like career advice. And then this is obviously a classic and this is a newer novel, but they all really lent to my life and my understanding of my place in the world in some way, and that's what good books are meant to do. So I realize lots of these are bittersweet, but so is life. And I think that they accurately reflect that. Maybe a happier book recommendation list coming up soon for 2018. But no, seriously, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please give it a like, because that helps a lot. And subscribe if you want to stick around and see more content I'm producing, because I will make more. I will. I'm committed now. Right. Right. See you all in the next one. Goodbye.